Hello and welcome to the Bonsai training session. In this session, we will walk you through the process of the content audit and the tool that will help you store your content inventory. So the content audit is the first piece of the content planning phase and is a very important topic as this exercise will help us determine what content should go on the new intranet and what content should be eliminated and how much of the new content needs to be rewritten from scratch or to be modified. So the agenda we are going to cover in this video is to go through the preparation of the content audit, some of the content audit considerations, some of the content scenarios, and then finally we'll walk you through how to use the content audit workbook. Now let's take a look at preparing the content audit. So the content audit is nothing but an inventory of your current intranet. So the purpose of doing a content audit is that it will help us understand the following. The first is to extract the content source and determine what content needs to be rewritten or deleted. The second one is to help us understand what content needs to be freshly brewed. And the third one is to build a foundation for the information architecture, which is also a navigation, and that will be followed later by the card sort and the tree test tasks. Now let's take a look at some of the factors that need to be considered before beginning the audit process. So the first one is to identify where are all of the content sources that need to be inventoried. For example, do you have content that is stored on a file share system or a Google Drive or maybe a OneDrive, or maybe does the content reside in SharePoint? Also, if you're using videos, are they stored in SharePoint, Microsoft Stream, or YouTube? So in the content source inventory, we would want to list down all the sources so that it will help us determine what content needs to be migrated on the new intranet. The second one is about the ownership of the content audit. So ideally, our recommendation is that each department does their own content audit to make sure that nothing is missed out. For example, a single person, as an example, a project manager, might not be aware of all the content that belongs to specific departments, and hence it's a good idea to have each department do their own content audit. Additionally, if your content resides in SharePoint, the SharePoint admin team should be able to get an extract of all the content using PowerShell scripts or by using different third-party tools. And the last one is to determine where would all the content audit reside. So in this case, we will provide you with a workbook where you can add all the audit information. Also, you can distribute as many copies required to different departments to fill out the content audit. And then finally, when we have all the information, we can then consider to merge it in a single spreadsheet. So in the next few minutes, we will show you how to use the content audit workbook. So when it comes to content scenarios, we would like to break this down into 4 different case studies. So the first one, this is where the content is no longer relevant and does not belong on the intranet, and so it will not be moved. As an example, any working document should not be on the intranet. So ideally, when it comes to the concept of the intranet, we would focus on having only the published documents. So the documents that are collaborative in nature shouldn't be on the intranet. In case number 2, this is where we know that the content is up to date, relevant, and will remain in the same format. For example, it could be a PDF or a Word document that has up-to-date information and is accurate. And then the effort involved is very minimal, as you would only have to move the document on the new intranet and then apply the metadata accordingly. And then in case number 3, we know that the content is good, relevant, but needs to be updated. Hence, this will be recreated. As an example, we would think of benefits page. So we can update the content and then copy paste into a Bonsai page and then apply the metadata accordingly. So that's case 3, where the content needs to be moved and has some work involved. And lastly, in the case 4 is a scenario where we identify that the content does not exist but needs to be on the new intranet and has to be rewritten from scratch. So FAQs is a good example here. So to elaborate more, a scenario would be that someone says, I have already been asked this 100 times and I've already answered this for 100 times. And hence, I think it would be a good idea to write this as an FAQ. So you would create the whole content from scratch, paste it into a bonsai page, and then apply the metadata. So in this case, there's some more work involved as it needs to be rewritten from scratch. Now let's learn how to use the Content Audit workbook. So this is a workbook that will be provided to you to capture your current content. You can use this workbook as a starting point. However, you can also feel free to use any other suitable spreadsheet of your choice in case if this template doesn't suit your requirements. However, at the end of the day, all we have to determine is based on this content audit result, we will have to create a powerful information architecture and identify what content needs to go on the new intranet. So this template is pretty powerful and comes with a detailed set of instructions which you can find on the first tab, which is named as instructions. The second tab is a current intranet space where you would start adding all the content sources of the content. To give you some bit more context on how to fill this out, you can refer to the adjacent tab called a sample intranet. So this is the space where you would start to add all the audit information. And here at the top, these are known as the levels, which is otherwise known as a hierarchy of your current intranet. For example, the home could be the root site, the about us is here underneath the home, and so on. Although this can go more granular, what we recommend is to have at least the first 3 levels as it will help us determine some factors while building the navigation for your new intranet. Moving on, the content description can be a one-liner explaining what the content is. The content owner can either be an individual or it could be the department itself. For example, it could be an HR department or it could be an admin department, etc. The content type can be a web page, item, image, video, or a document. Next is the audience, as to who can access or view the content. It could be all employers, it could be management, or maybe the document is locked down to department specific. Also, it is good to know if you're aware of the usage of the content. In case if you're using Google Analytics for your intranet, you should be able to capture the frequency of the documents that are being used. However, in case if you do not know, it's okay as some of the fields mentioned over here are not mandatory, but it's a nice to have type of information. Next, you can select a suitable case for every content. Example, whether you need to keep the content as it is, or rewrite but needs some formatting, or rewrite in the same format as it is and just move it over, or otherwise to delete the document, which we consider as this content will never go on the new intranet. So this is quite beneficial as it helps us calculate the migration effort. And also, in the last tab, you can add the links to the content under the current location field. Similarly, in case if you have content over the file share system, you can fill that out in a very similar way as we just saw in the current intranet tab. So finally, that wraps up the session on the content audit. This should hopefully give you an idea of how you can use it to draw inventory of your current intranet. If you have any questions regarding any of the topics discussed in this video, please contact your assigned customer success manager and they will be able to help you with any further information that you might need regarding the topics we discussed today. Thank you very much for listening to this video and we will see you on our next training session.